Welcome, quiet soul. You always hear what others miss. So today you are the listener history has been waiting for. Today you're Olive Oatman, a woman so famous that 19th century America simply couldn't look away. Back then, if a woman became famous, she was either a saint or a scandal. Marie Curie was brilliant, sure, but she had to wait until the 20th century to start glowing. You didn't need a Nobel Prize. You were kidnapped. And before we dive in, I'd love to know, did anything in this story strike a chord with you? Stir your curiosity, drop a comment below. Who knows? Your thought might just become the little treasure the whole community will want to dig up. And hey, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to like, share, or hit subscribe. Because sometimes a single click can send 100 amazing stories rippling outward. Yes, you were kidnapped. More precisely, taken captive by Native Americans, then lived with them. Then bonded. Then didn't really want to leave. And just like that, your name ended up in every newspaper, every whisper, every midnight fireside tale in America, though you never discovered a single element besides yourself. Your legacy came in the form of 3 dark blue stripes tattooed on your chin, inked with cactus thorns dipped in charcoal secret herbs, and perhaps a drop of Mojave blood seeping up from your heart to your skin. By Victorian white beauty standards, you looked like a vampire who'd just downed a celery smoothie and forgot to wipe her mouth. But you didn't hide it. You didn't need to. To you, those greenish-blue marks were your second birth certificate, a tribal decree written in plant ink proof that you had once been deeply loved in a world with no churches, no banks, and no railroad timetables. Of course, the civilized folks' quotation marks mandatory couldn't begin to understand. They frowned, shook their heads, stared at you like a broken-winged butterfly trying to fly into a flame. A white girl attached to a life of savages in a scorched desert and mud-plastered huts. It sounded like blasphemy wrapped in sunburn. But you knew better than anyone that life stuck to you with nails, scars, and memory. Hold on. Don't jump ahead just yet. To understand why you stayed stuck, we need to go back to the day the wagon wheels began to creak across the desert, rolling toward the promised land where rumour had it God himself once slipped on a rock during a windy afternoon. It was a dusty March morning in Illinois. The snow had just melted off the fence posts. Fog coiled over rooftops like a lazy ghost. Your house on the edge of the town of La Harpe was getting a final wipe down, your mother scrubbing the window panes with a damp rag, ready to pack up the family in search of God, or at the very least cheaper land. Then came Mr. Brewster, a man who once fabricated 3 visions and survived 2 imaginary cases of appendicitis just back from the West, waving a map, a Bible, and 2 sacks of rocks that were almost certainly gold. Standing in the middle of the tiny church beard, trembling, he declared, "The Lord has prepared a land for the faithful. Out west in the desert is a second Garden of Eden." Your father nodded. Your mother prayed. And you barefoot in cracked leather sandals, your baby teeth not even fully grown in thought. Why not? You'd never seen a desert. You'd never met God. But it sounded like an adventure. You had no idea that a few years later your name would be etched into American history by your chin. So you climbed aboard the wagon, and the day your family's wagon rolled out of Illinois alongside a caravan so large no one bothered to count, you believed you were beginning a sacred journey, not stumbling into a blood-soaked fate. Everyone was heading west. Everyone believed God was hiding a fertile land just past the mountains, a place without floods where grass grew waist-high, and the devout could live so close to him they'd hear heaven knock every morning. The caravan moved like a religious procession. Wagon wheels sliced through tender grass dresses, flared in the wind, children screamed in harmony with off-key hymns. Every time the wagon stopped, people lit fires, baked bread, and read Revelation like they were already on the doorstep of paradise. You, 13, then sat beside your mother braiding Mary Ann's hair, while your aunts debated whether there'd be apples out west. Your father was certain across the desert lay something worth trading everything for, and harvests, maybe even the English language. Everything started to unravel in Santa Fe. Mr. Brewster, the spiritual guide of the caravan, his eyes glistening like he'd just finished a private chat with the Lord, announced that he'd received a new revelation. They were to turn north toward the Utah Valley. Your father's face tightened like a bowstring pulled to breaking. Which God, which voice, he asked flatly. Voice neither loud nor soft. Then he folded the map, turned from the crowd, and walked away without asking permission. Your mother quietly packed the rice. Lorenzo checked the horses' hooves. Some families hesitated, then stayed. But your family, just 9 people, a single wagon, a few bags of belongings, turned south. From that moment on, Every day stretched like tangled thread. The singing stopped, the evening hymns faded. All that remained were the brittle snaps of dry rope, the gnawing ache of hunger, and some nights your father sighing in the dark. You didn't know why the moonlight slicing through the wagon's canopy began to frighten you, but you didn't say a word. No one did. No one asked, "Are we sure this is the right way?" With each turn of the wheels, another layer of dust settled over that question, heavy, dull, then gone. The weather shifted. The earth grew hard as stone, the rocks sharp as knives, water rare as miracles. No footsteps ahead, no travellers behind. The farther you went, the stranger the land became. At a place called Maricopa Wells, your father still hoped for supplies. But when told they'd have to wait weeks, he simply waved his hand, climbed aboard, and signalled the journey on. "We have enough." He said it again and again, like a broken psalm beneath a searing gold sky. 4 days later, you learned that enough is a word that dissolves like steam off a boiling pot. The final stretch before Yuma unrolled over dead land, silent, treeless, cruel. The sun bleached the sand white. Sap boiled from the wagon wheels. The horses wheezed like they were hauling boulders. The Gila River was nothing but a scar, now just dry sand, scattered pebbles, shards of dead glass. Your mother poured water into a bowl, then poured it back into the bag, not daring a sip. Roland, your 6-year-old brother, belly sunken like a shriveled squash, still held onto his legless straw doll Ruth, and set her next to him, as if she too were a passenger. And you began to hear your own blood pulsing in your ears like the drumbeat of a hunter drawing his bow. That noon, your father stopped the wagon beneath a rocky ledge, offering a sliver of shade. Everyone climbed down, pulling out scraps of dry bread. You were breaking a piece for Mary Ann when your mother froze. She didn't chew, she didn't blink. She just stared, eyes locked on the top of the ridge. You turned. Shadows. 3, then 4, then 7. They stood still as fence posts the sun, casting a warped halo behind them, bending the world like heat on glass. Your family was being ambushed. Your father stepped forward, hand brushing the gun holster. Lorenzo drew his knife. Roland clutched your wrist, his tiny fingers digging in like tender vines, grasping for something solid. Then the first arrow landed thock in the dirt just in front of the horse's hoof. Mary Ann screamed. Your mother yanked you into her arms. Her hair slapped your cheek like a wet broom. And then everything shattered like a window breaking from the inside. Horse shrieks, your mother crying your father's name. Lorenzo's voice roaring as he charged into a flood of brown-skinned figures pouring down the slope. Someone swung an axe. It landed on your father's chest. He fell like a felled tree. Blood sprayed in a red arc. Your mother lunged after him but was yanked backward. You saw her hand reaching toward you, then disappear. Lorenzo stabbed one of them, but a blow from behind took him down. He hit the sand hard. His eyes stayed open. His neck twitched once. Roland screamed for his mother. Someone grabbed him, lifted him up like a chicken in a butcher's hand. He turned his head to look for you. His eyes were wet. His lips pressed tight. That was the last moment you ever saw your brother. Mary Ann was torn from your grasp. Her dress ripped. Her knees scraped raw. You kicked. You screamed. You thrashed. But it was like striking a smoking boulder. Nothing got through. No sound pierced the wall of fate. By the time your hands were tied and you were dragged away, the wagon had already toppled. A broken wheel lay sideways in the dirt. Blood pooled beneath the rocks, and the wind passed through it, all calm indifferent as if nothing worth remembering had ever happened there. No one counted the survivors. No one looked at you and asked, do you still have anyone left to call family? You didn't know where they were taking you. You still don't. What day is it now? You can't tell. All you know is that each morning you wake with the same ache clawing at your chest like a fishbone. Your parents, your 4 siblings. The wagon tossed into red sand. Now it's just you and Mary Ann, wrists bound, led by the Yavapai over rocks and through dry ravines across cracked earth, baked so hot your heels blistered under the sun. They brought you to their village, a cluster of huts tucked into the Harquahala slopes. Wikiup's bent ocotillo branches lashed with dry leaves and animal hide. The ground was soft, the roots exposed, twisting like veins under paper skin, as if the earth was pre-digging a grave for someone. The Yavapai didn't pull thorns, they lived with them. And you were about to learn how to do the same. In front of a hut, the chief stepped out. His robe was goat hide grey with ash. A necklace of wolf teeth hung from his neck. He was wiry, twig-thin, but his gaze was sharper than any blade. He studied you slowly, then raised a long spear. It wasn't a greeting, it was a verdict bait, or tool. The next morning no one hit you. They didn't have to. Rules here didn't need words. You bent your back and hauled water, your shoulders burned, your hands shook. Marianne was sent to gather sticks. She crouched, tiny fingers skimming the dirt, careful among the thorns and dust. Filth clung to her skin like she was made of parchment. She bent forward, eyes dazed and hollow. It reminded you of your parents on the day the caravan split, no tears, just quiet resignation pressing against their faces like a lead blanket. That memory trickled through you, slowly drop by drop, breath by breath, like salt soaking into your blood. Breakfast was a sludge of acorns and mesquite pods. Thick, pasty, bitter with ash. You ate slowly because hunger wouldn't let you throw it up. Marianne chewed while clutching her one-eared cloth bear. It was the only thing that still whispered of home. The porridge did not. It only said, "You're alive, and your body will pay for it." Bathing meant walking to the creek. You and your sister rubbed yourselves with fruit peels. The water was yellow with mud. The sun seared your back. Every splash felt like scrubbing off your name. Off came your mother's sweat. Off came the scent of your father's cornbread. What remained was burned skin and the smell of strangers. By midday you were given hides to patch a torn roof. The tools were stone or maybe bone, you couldn't tell. All you knew was they cut. Hard. The hides reeked of ash and fat. The first patch tore in your hands like your heart did when you thought of Roland. An old Yavapai woman showed you how to sew. Crooked stitches meant failure. Failure meant no supper. No one said this aloud. They didn't need to. Their eyes told you a missing task meant a fading person fading like smoke. You heard Marianne whisper, "Sister, I miss Mama." You didn't answer. Dust crusted your lashes. She lowered her face into her skirt. You wondered, how long can I keep this up? There were no soft words here. No medicine for stuttering. No one to beg. The sound of javelinas echoed through the trees, their way of telling you it was time to gather agave. No orders, just eyes, or a gentle nudge of the elbow. Dinner was even smaller than lunch. The porridge was cold. Marianne's mesquite cake was shorter than usual. Under the sunset, you saw a Yavapai woman smile. A child began to cry. And you realized you were a story now, a form of amusement for people who lived on dirt and grief. They laughed on top of tears, literally. That night the tribe circled the fire. Children danced in goatskin wraps. Their mouths mimicked birdsong. They blew into reed flutes to make wind noises, the bird songs of their people. Time passed, if past is even the right word, in a place where no one counted days. You counted moons, 12 full ones. Each time the moon swelled in the sky, you were still there. Still called Olive. But that name no longer came with anything familiar. No wooden bed, no cornbread, no father's gravel laugh when your mother scolded the ripped doll. Now your name didn't echo in kitchens or bedrooms. It came from the cracked lips of an old Yavapai woman calling you to dig root bulbs. Or from children tugging your sleeve asking you to pick lice from their scalps. Yes, you got good at picking lice. Your body once scrubbed with warm cloth by your mother had become a kingdom of crawling things. Every time you took off your shirt, a soft black dust would fall from your shoulders. Not ash, lice eggs. Marianne had grown thin as a brittle winter twig. She slept more than she spoke. You often stroked her hair only to flinch when your fingers brushed against a red ant nest. Some nights in a fevered whisper she would murmur, "Is Mama baking bread?" And you would feel something inside your chest loosen and sink like a tent rope soaked through by rain, heavy sagging to the marrow. You used to believe the human body could adapt to anything. But now you understood there are places not made for adaptation, only for surrender. Your hair thinned, turned wiry and dull like scorched weeds. Your back festered with sores from sleeping too long on damp straw. Every time you squatted to relieve yourself, it became a deadly game of balance and prayer, watching for fire ants that seemed to favour the most sensitive parts of your anatomy. There were no seasons here, just two kinds of weather, the kind that cracked your heels like old leather, and the kind that turned the ground to slick bloodfish slime. You learned to gather dew from leaves, to tell poisonous mushrooms by the colour on their fringes, and to know when an agave was ripe by the smell it gave off when the wind shifted. Then one day, without warning or fanfare, fortune arrived. You don't remember the exact date. The sky was a dim grey. The ground beneath your feet was soft and sticky as if it had just survived a reluctant rain. No one woke you. No one ordered you to do anything. The whole village sat in an eerie hush, like an entire tribe trying not to breathe too loudly. hoping to save what little energy they had left. And then from the western hill a small group appeared. They weren't many, just over a dozen walking shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in thick woven blankets, their hair coiled neatly baskets strapped to their backs. The Yavapai didn't greet them, nor did they seem surprised. This wasn't uncommon. Travelling Mojave groups often passed through on trade routes across the semi-arid lands. You and Marianne were pushed to the edge of the village, the place where unsightly things were kept out of visitors' eyes. But this time, one Mojave woman stopped in her tracks when she saw you both. She stared for a long while, then turned and called to someone. Another joined her, then another. Slowly the group formed a crescent around the two of you two ragged-haired, scarred-legged girls with eyes too tired to cry anymore. Marianne clung to your hand. You didn't lift your head, not out of fear, but because you were simply too exhausted to believe anything might change. The negotiation was brief. You couldn't understand the words, only saw the offering a few blankets, some seeds, pure white salt, and two finely braided yucca ropes that shimmered like silk. A ransom, perhaps, or simply the price of survival. The Yavapai nodded, no ceremony, no farewell. You felt your heart pull tight, not because of hope, but because it had learned not to expect anything anymore. Another tribe just meant more firewood, more tents to mend more days to survive. That was all. The Mojave woman, probably their leader, held out her hand. Her skin was dry like old willow bark, but her palm was warm. Very warm. Marianne raised her face. Above her the crescent moon hung thin and sharp like a cut sweet and deep. You stepped forward. You woke to a sound so unfamiliar it felt like a lullaby, water trickling beside your ear, soft as if a river were whispering. The scent of willowwood smoke curled through the air, mingling with moss, and something gently sweet you couldn't name, maybe flowers, maybe sweat, maybe both, as if the land and its people were breathing together. You were lying on deer hide padded with dried reeds, not soft but not cold. Nearby a large rock, heated from the night before, still held a faint warmth. A small gesture, but unmistakable. Someone thought you deserved a good sleep. Marianne was still curled up, face tucked into an old blanket. The stitches in its yucca weave were crooked but strong, like the only thing still steady in your chest. You sat up your head, brushing the low ceiling of the hut. No soaring church roof here. The roof was woven from grass, tilted just enough to catch the wind, sturdy enough to last through a whole season of dust storms. Outside, the Mojave women were already up. They coaxed fires from the previous day's ashes, stirred coals with sticks and blew through reeds. You had once burned an entire pot of mush, and instead of being beaten, you had been guided wordlessly patiently, with only a nod and a look that waited. They handed you clothes, a hand-stitched deerskin skirt tied with agave fibre. A top. There wasn't one. They didn't cover their chests. They didn't care if you were embarrassed. To them, beauty resided in the blue-green tattoos that ran from chin to collarbone, sacred marks sewn by cactus spine and memory. You didn't have those yet, but someone had already imagined them on your face. Since coming to the Mojave, your rhythm changed quietly but irrevocably. No one said you may stay. But every morning the bent-backed elder came to part Marianne's hair, with a comb made of fishbone rubbing thick jojoba oil into her scalp. She didn't smile, but her hands were warm, steady like a lullaby with no lyrics. Your hut sat at the village edge between two old oaks. The roof was made of thatched reeds, the frame bent from branches fire-hardened the floor, lined with hides sewn together by deer sinew. Someone always left a small bundle of firewood near where you slept, just enough for a pot of mush, as if the world still held someone who worried you might get cold. You learned how to pound agave until soft-roast it over hot stone. Its smell rose, sweet and smoky. Aya, the girl with thorn sandals and long black hair, nodded, then placed in your hand a bracelet made of polished mesquite beads. You didn't have time to say thank you. She had already turned her hair, fluttering like painted silk. The children swarmed around you, chattering like birds. They wove your hair with soaked roots, adorned your shoulders with feathers, then ran circles as if summoning rain. One little boy, his head shaved on one side, the other plaited high, shoved a crisp dried fish into your mouth, laughing like firecrackers. And you for the first time in 12 moons laughed too. Not loudly, but enough to make the moon tilt just a little lower that night. At midday, the women gathered in a circle under the shade trees, weaving baskets, their mouths chewing sweet roots that tasted like honeyed earth. They handed you a coil of vine, showed you how to fold each crease so the basket's mouth would stay even its bottom round. One of them dabbed ash on your cheek in the shape of a flower to keep the wind from crawling into your face, she said. No one asked if you were tired. No one coddled. But every small gesture made your skin feel less foreign, your hands less shaky, your heart less broken. The village chief, the man with 2 purple tattoos stretching from his temples to behind his ears, had once handed you a hand-woven cotton tunic, rarer than salt in the desert. He never spoke your name, but each morning his eyes would pass over you first as he stepped out of his lodge. And on crescent moon nights, when the tribe gathered around the fire, he'd point toward you, beckoning you to tell a story. Even if your Mojave was broken and childlike, he'd listen till the end, as if every word held something he'd long forgotten. Days drifted past like a gentle breeze, never forcing you to chase them, never leaving you behind. They circled around you instead, carrying the scent of corn porridge, the crackle of burning mesquite, and Marianne's hair resting heavier and heavier on your arm each night, like peaceful sleep settling in. You lived through days like that, not to forget, but to be fully there, until the trial slithered into the village, no footsteps, no warning. Hunger didn't arrive like a flood, but like a pickpocket, quiet, patient, and thorough. The summer dragged on too long, and the floods never came. The river dried, rocks lay belly up in the cracked earth, dried weeds snapped underfoot. Mesquite bore no fruit, agave snapped before ripening. Fires still burned, but the pots sat hollow. Eyes sunk deeper than drought-stricken soil. You survived on a thick black gruel mud laced with ash. The children stopped playing. No more drawings on your arms. They curled beneath trees like empty bird nests. Even the dogs stopped barking. One morning you saw an old man clutch a bundle, shuffle toward the riverbank, and never return. Marianne began to cough. Raspy. Then came the fever. Then came her tiny fingers curling up in your hand, cold, as if clinging to something only she could still see. You wrapped her in the softest hide you could find. Every spoonful of porridge you gave to her first. One of the elder women, the same who once combed her hair, brought you boiled bark water and pressed it into your hands without a word. You understood. So did the whole village. But no one said anything, not from indifference, but because every person was saving their last breath for someone of their own. That morning she didn't wake. No one screamed. No one wept. There was no wooden box, no white cloth laid over her face. Only you, a shallow grave, a folded piece of hide, and a slanted cactus branch laid gently across a stone. The pain in you didn't explode. It smouldered. It pulled at your insides like someone tearing your gut out by hand. No more Marianne grabbing your fingers. No more quiet whispers before sleep. For the first time since captivity, you felt truly alone. But the village didn't stop. Fires were still lit. Hands still wove. And one evening the fire blazed brighter than usual. Corn cakes were passed around. Children giggled faintly on the dusty ground. The survivors leaned on one another slowly like a forest regrowing after the flames pass. On the first full moon, after the drought, you were called into the circle. Ia, the girl who had once given you a mesquite bead bracelet, stepped forward. In her hand was a cactus thorn dipped in ash. No one tied your hands. No one told you must. You nodded. The needle touched your skin. It burned, but it burned like a blade, slicing off something you no longer needed to carry. One dark green line appeared, then another and another across your chin. Each mark felt like a memory being stitched into place, as if your past was carving a space for itself beneath your skin. No one looked away. No one flinched. The village watched, not with pity, not with shock, but with the kind of welcome reserved for someone who had finally come home. You didn't hurt. You didn't want it to stop. Every vein inside you pulsed like a drumbeat, and you knew after everything you'd finally found a place to lay your name down, not on stone, but inside the memory of a people who never needed a birth certificate to call you family. The next morning you washed your face by the river. Looking down, you saw a different Olive reflected back 3 deep blue lines running from chin to collarbone, sharp as stitches binding a soul together. That face smiled at you white as mist, but so real you could hear yourself smiling back. No one taught you how to become Mojave. You had become it bone, breath and blood. That day you were helping them lay out porcupine quills to dry soon to be dyed and braided into hair for the coming festival. The air smelled of sun-dry fur and the waxy sap of yucca. You laughed when the children tossed dried seed pods at each other like toys. Then came the sound of hoofbeats. Not the kind from the village, those moved like wind, soft as mountain cats. These were hard, sharp, like steel boots stomping down on dry earth. The kind of steps that weren't meant to arrive but to command. You looked up. A cloud of dust cracked open on the horizon like someone sweeping iron bristles through the world you'd come to know. American soldiers, blue coats, polished rifles, beards thick and scruffy like gun-cleaning rags glued to their jaws. One jumped down with solemnity like he'd just discovered the new world. Miss Olive Oatman, you were holding a bundle of yucca fibres, your hands sticky with resin. A Mojave child clung to your leg. Aya stood behind you, her eyes lit like fire. You were to be returned to civilization, they declared, as if handing you a one-way ticket to heaven. But really it was toward dry bread, tight dresses, and eyes sharper than microscopes. You didn't move, the officer pointed at a hut. If you don't hand her over, we'll burn the entire village. So polite, so civilized. Instead of kidnapping you, they chose to torch the place you loved. The Mojave chief said nothing. He stepped forward, bent down, and picked up a stone not to throw but to place silently at your feet. Then he turned away, and you understood that was the most solemn farewell a people who don't bow could give you when the other side had guns and all you had was a bark cloth dress and 3 streaks of blue ink. You climbed onto the horse, head under sun, heart under fire. One soldier shoved a biscuit into your hand, dry as desert earth. You looked at the biscuit, then at him. Is this the reward? If it were up to you, you'd smash his face in with the same grinding stone you used each morning to pound corn. They took you back to civilization. They gave you water, a lace dress, a small mirror, and a doctor not to treat illness, but to confirm you hadn't gone feral. You looked in the mirror and saw the 3 blue lines on your chin in airs that might have looked like childish scribbles to others, but you knew they were your certificate of humanity. A kind of diploma of the heart. Someone asked, do you want them removed? You answered, how scrape off the flesh. And so you, the Mojave girl in a flannel dress, were dragged from the village where someone combed your hair every morning, back to a town where people combed through rumours with sharper teeth. The 3 blue marks were no longer a sign of family. They became jewellery, a bizarre little trend ahead of its time. You returned to town as a spectacle. The press called you the white girl who lived with savages. People came not to ask how you were, but to see if you'd eaten anyone. Some mothers used you as a bedtime threat, misbehave again, and I'll let the Mojave take you. They paid you to give lectures. Real money. You were placed on stage in a velvet chair dress, stiff as armour-high collar, brushing your ears, breathing loud against the fabric. The announcer raised his arm, voice booming, "Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Olive Oatman, Iving witness of the wild." You stood. You spoke. But every time you said they, the white folks heard those people. Every time you said the Mojave taught me, the audience shuddered like you'd confessed to loving a monster. And when you said I lived, they asked, were you raped? You moved to Sherman, married a man named Stratton, a decent man, measured, didn't ask too many questions. You lived in a white house with a porch, climbing roses, woven rugs, everything straight out of a magazine. But every night you undressed from your lace gown, looked in the mirror and saw the 3 blue marks. You didn't hide them, didn't cover, didn't try to erase. You kept them the way others kept a photo of their mother. When you gave lectures, you let the light shine directly on your chin. When you walked the street, you let the children stare, so they could see a woman could belong to more than one world. And then you grew old. The marks faded but never vanished. Some said that even when they buried you, the lines remained faint as incense smoke beneath wax-coloured skin. Your gravestone bore one name, Olive Oatman. That was it. No titles, no slogans, nothing more. Because you had lived, truly lived.